and Big Joe Show.
Give your 2 cents in at 239-1070.
Now, here's Michael Grady and Big Joe Stacey.
On a foggy day to close out 2018. Looking outside of Monument Circle, Joe, man,
that's a low ceiling, baby.
It's a beautiful fog, though.
I mean, it's like half the building. You can't see the top of some of the buildings here.
You know what? I have this weird fascination with fog. It may sound silly, but I'm like a child. You can't see anything. I don't know why it fascinates me.
Until you walk through it, and then you're fine. You just see small. Was it a horror movie kind of thing?
Maybe. I don't. No, I'm not scared of it. I just think it's cool. Like,
so
the clouds are low.
The top 2/3.
I'm scared of fog, but I just find it fascinating. I just think fog's
just like water droplets in the air. Grady, it's nothing to be afraid of.
Okay, you got an A in weather. What is? It's water droplets. Type of smart ass. Let's welcome in Stephen Holder right now. There was some surprising water droplets in the second half yesterday that we weren't anticipating. On Friday when we did the show, we said a 10% chance of precipitation, but we saw some rain yesterday. Stephen Holder, the Athletic, joining us right now. The Titans did all they could. They just didn't have enough, Stephen. And the Colts made things interesting themselves with some mistakes, but ultimately did what they needed to do.
Yeah, that was pretty much the summary of it. And I think at the end of the day, the better team obviously prevailed, and no one was surprised by that. The game should not have been close. It should have been a runaway. But I think there's sort of an under-the-radar conversation here we have to have. I mean, they have to clean this up. I mean, you can't go to Houston and play like that. Otherwise, a week from today, we will be having a very different conversation. But that doesn't take away, obviously, from the achievement of this team this year and the odds they have overcome. You know, just the third team to do this, to overcome a 1-5 start and go to the playoffs. I mean, come on.
When did you start to come around? One of the narratives that I thought was really interesting in my mind. They were 1-5 and looked really bad. And when they would have tough stretches in games, I know they went on a run winning, but even within those games when they had, tough stretches, someone would say, or you would think, yeah, well, they're not that good. Well, they're not that good anyway. Or they're not, they're not that, okay, they made this mistake here, but they're not that great anyway. But there had to be a turning point where you go, well, maybe they are that good. Maybe they are good, and then this play is unacceptable right now. Like, when did that transition happen? Because early in the season, the mistakes, you're like, well, they're not that good. But then when they went on the run, and the mistakes will creep in here or there, it's like, when did the expectations change for you in terms of, oh, these guys are better than that?
Well, I'll start by saying this. I really felt from the beginning that they were playing very good football in large stretches. And the difference between winning and losing, though, is not very big. And they got a huge dose of reality on that. I mean, that's what those first 6 games proved, right? I mean, you can play very well, like against the Cincinnati Bengals. If you don't get it done, you don't get it done. And you go home with an L. So that's just how it works. But, so let me rephrase it. So I felt pretty confident that, all right, this team is going to be okay in the long term. I thought in the short term, though, I thought the damage was done. So now I would say they got to the Buffalo game and they ran away with that. But, I mean, that didn't necessarily change my mind because Buffalo was a mess, right? I mean, then they played Derek Anderson in that game. So that wasn't exactly the game that sifted it, but I think it was them carrying over momentum from that game. That, I thought, told me something. Going out to Oakland, certainly a team that was struggling, but handling your business. And I think going into the bye with that win in particular, that did something for them. And I think they were able to carry that through. And that's when I think they just figured out how to close games out. I mean, Darius Leonard and that takeaway he had against Doug Martin to close out the Oakland game. Oh, yeah. I think there was something really significant about that play. I was in that locker room in Oakland, and those guys felt like, you know what, this is what the sentiment was kind of like, man, this is what we've been talking about. We told you guys, we can close teams out. We just got to figure out ways to do it. We just got to prove it. And I think it was kind of I don't know if that was the turning point, but it was one milepost of many, I think. And then it just got steadily better from there. It's funny, it wasn't one particular game necessarily. It was this steady build. And I think that it tells you more than anything that this team was getting increasingly better over the course of the season. So then what you have now is a team that seems poised, perhaps, to do something grander. But, again, they'll have to clean it up. But I think the fact that they've gotten better over the course of the season, I think there's very clear evidence of that. I think that should be very, very intriguing to people.
What do you make of the running game and the ups and downs of it? You go for 220 a couple weeks in a row. You're, held to 2.5, the next week. Is that something that maybe is game plan oriented, or is it something that really, Ryan Kelly, we have the stat 4.4 when he's in, 3.2 when he's not in. But yesterday they ran for 158. 4.5 a carry, looked pretty good, and that's something they're going to need as they go into the playoffs here. Is that sustainable, I guess?
The downward games, I guess the down games, I should say, in the running game have been a little bit confusing, and I haven't been able to make a lot of sense of that. I do think Ryan Kelly's a big factor because I think we undersell Ryan Kelly's contributions. I think he has had a fabulous season. Of him and Quentin Nelson in particular in the middle is something that I don't think we talk about enough. I mean, we talk about Quentin Nelson in a singular fashion is a unit, okay? So when one piece of that, sort of assembly is missing, I do think it takes a toll, and I think he's a big part of it. And I don't think anyone should undersell Ryan Kelly. He has had quite a conversation another day. But as to the running game, I think the running game is pretty good. I actually think the games where they've struggled, those have been the exceptions to the rule. I think generally speaking, Marlon Mack has progressed. He's one of those guys who's gotten better over the course of the season, I feel like. He was making some runs yesterday where he looked like a young Frank Gore. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. I know it's sacrilegious to say that, but I don't think Frank would be offended by me saying that. I mean, those were the types of runs that Frank made a living on. Keeping your legs moving, yards after contact. By the way, Marlon Mack, I looked this up a couple weeks ago. I need to get the more updated stat. But Marlon Mack, in terms of yards after contact, the second half of the season, he has been one of the leaders in that category. And he's been up there with guys like Ezekiel Elliott and guys like that. I mean, so he is a different brand of running back than we ever thought he was going to be. So I do think they have had some struggles in the running game periodically. There's no question about that. But I think that has been one of those situations where I think defenses have set out to take it away from them in some instances, which is fine. And they have proven that they're a very pliable offense. They can beat you however you want it, okay? You tell me how you want it, and we'll give it to you that way. And they're able to do that, and that's Frank Reich's offense. And listen, that means that defenses are having to make choices, okay? And that's a very good thing. So even at those times when the running game has struggled, notice something, Frank Reich will stick with it. And he'll give opportunities. They won't run it 30 times, but they'll still try to run it 15, 16 times and at least keep the defense honest and still be able to make their plays in the passing game. So I think it's fine. Don't worry about the numbers from week to week in the running game. Just worry about the fact that it's a threat, and that's the most important thing.
Stephen Holder, The Athletic, joining us on the Payless Liquors hotline here on 107.5 and 1070 The Fan. I did an interview with folks in Nashville, and they were asking me about Frank, and then I started raving about Andrew on the O-line. They asked me about Andrew, and while answering about Andrew, I started raving about the offensive line and Frank. They asked me about the offensive line, and while answering the question about the O-line, I started raving about Frank and Andrew. You see where I'm going with this? Like this, right. It's like the perfect symmetry. And Joe was bringing up the Andrew setting a record, 13th different player catching a receiving touchdown from Andrew Luck, and that's a lot of Andrew, but it's also a lot of Frank. It's just seemed to be the perfect marriage, this trio with the resurgence this season.
It does. And look, I think I don't want to be dramatic, okay? but I will be.
Here comes the drama.
Here it comes. Yep.
I'm here for it.
So listen, look at the history, the annals of the NFL, and the dynasty teams, which obviously is not even a conversation we should be having, but I'm just saying that's what you want to emulate, right? So the dynasty teams, what do they have? They have very good players, but I think they have either a trio, right, or triplets like the Cowboys did, or they have a coach-quarterback tandem that was just, very, very rare. I think about Bill Walsh and his quarterbacks, right? And I know I'm not saying Frank Reich is Bill Walsh, but what I'm saying is that is a tried and true formula, all right? And they have tapped into that, okay? Whether it has the same kind of outcome, well, that remains to be seen. But, I mean, if you're judging by the first year, there's nothing but positives to speak of. I mean, if we're talking about Frank Reich and Andrew Luck, that has the potential to be a phenomenal combination. And it's funny. That's why I actually thought Josh McDaniels at the time, I said, okay, that makes sense because he could be that guy for Andrew Luck. And I still feel like there was some potential there for that. But what you couldn't have factored in was how he would be in terms of the team, the greater team, and the team at large, right? And how he would deal with those interpersonal relationships and all of the things that come with being the head coach. It's a lot more than scheme. But in this case, they get the scheme, they get the partnership of the coach and the quarterback, and they also get the leadership, which, let me tell you something. I'm going to get off subject here a little bit. I'm telling you, my story today was all about their chemistry. And, I mean, there's a lot of lines in there that I kind of took a step back and said, this is probably kind of corny. But I don't think so, man. I'm telling you something.
Wow.
I'm in that locker room every single day. This is not a normal group. They have something that that you can't duplicate. I saw Chris Ballard in the locker room after the game. I said, buddy, I don't know how you did it. I said, but your locker room, you got a different group of guys. And he says people keep rolling their eyes when I talk about the locker room. He says, that matters. And it absolutely does matter. And I think it is a huge, huge reason for why they're here. I thought a lot of players told me last night. He said, you know what happens when you're 1-5? Malik Hooker told me. He said, guys, check out. They go get their stats. All right? Did you see that happen? I didn't.
No.
And that's a very unique, I think, outcome from that situation.
Stephen, I heard for the first time last week something about a leadership council or something or other, and Frank talked about, I'm not telling you who's on it because it's not important and blah, 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 blah. Tell me more about that. And I got to tell you, I'm just going to take a stab in the dark. I think T.Y. Hilton is on it because T.Y. Hilton is a different player this year. The way he's just matured and accepted playing hurt. The effort he gave yesterday being banged up was amazing. Even though it wasn't huge in the stats. And that's going to need to push forward if we expect a win in Houston.
Yeah, I actually think you're so right about that. And so on this leadership council, again, they didn't give a lot of details on it, but I think that's what smart coaches do. And one thing Frank has told me is, he says, it can't just be about me. He said, leadership is not about me. It's about we. And he's right. I mean, I know everybody says that and it's kind of a cliche and all that, but it's true. He said, granted, yes, I am the leader, but, as the head coach, but what you have to do is, look, the head coach isn't going to be omnipresent. Okay. He's not in 10 different places at one time. He can't be in every meeting room at one time. He's got to deploy his assistant coaches, and he's got to deploy his veteran leaders to be able to say, all right, this is the standard that Coach Reich set, and this is what you're going to live up to. And that is very much what happened. I asked guys last week, I said, have you ever been checked by Frank Reich? And they're like, you know what? No. And I thought that was very interesting. But yet they have a very clear, disciplined culture, right? I mean, they're a very disciplined team in terms of guys staying in line and those kinds of things. And guys are very clear to me, like, yeah, you know what? He's never had to check me. And that's because it's happening elsewhere. The veterans are doing it. The assistant coaches are doing it. It never gets to Frank Reich's desk. And that tells you that's the best kind of leadership. That's a guy who was able to do it without having to kind of insert himself in every situation. So I'm just telling you, I just think that has been that has been very, very telling of the kind of culture he's created. And I'm just telling you, man, there's really something special there. I just feel like the culture and the character in that locker room has gone a long, long way to getting them where they are. And to your point about T.Y., he's not the only guy that I think has matured this year. Take a guy like Quincy Wilson. He's a different guy this year. Quincy Wilson is talking like a grown man, like a grown-ass man. I'm just telling you.
Wow.
I'm looking at him like, who are you? You know what I mean? Like, last year, you were like, I don't know what I did wrong. I don't know why they're not playing me. I don't know, poor me. And you know what? This year, he got his act together, and now they can't keep him off the field. And that's how you do it, man. You earn it. Yeah. And I think even Malik Hooker mentioned that. Malik actually observed, he said, Quincy is a different guy this year. So when your teammates are noticing it, that means you're doing something right.
Yeah, and again, more credit to Chris Ballard because we were mentioning this maybe a week or two ago about some of the decisions and some of the guys that were let go and the Simons that were let go and the Hankins and different guys that they parted ways with, and we're going to build with these young guys, and you're not sure what that timetable is going to be. You're going to let the young guys take their lumps. Okay, this is going to be a tough year. But it says a lot about the character of these young guys. You said Quincy Wilson sounds like a grown man. Darius Leonard is like a grandpa out there. I mean, he's like he's lived two lives out there. And I like what he said, after the game about the way this season has gone. Is kind of sums up his life and being the underdog and being team was probably ranked 32nd heading this season and look at where they are right now. It's really been a special campaign, and Darius is. I just continue to marvel at his play, Stephen. He's really something special.
You know what I think is interesting about Darius. He has really gravitated to Robert Mathis. And that doesn't surprise me. They are, in many ways, they're very similar, okay? Now, Robert was a fifth-round pick, right? So he was even more of a long shot. Darius, obviously, a second-round pick. I mean, a very high second-round pick. So, I mean, this guy clearly exceeded expectations from a small school, historically black college, a guy who, maybe a little undersized by some people's standard, of an inside linebacker. But, you know what? He has really gravitated to Robert Mathis, and I get it now. It's not just because they're in the same fraternity. They're the same guy. They really are. Robert Mathis, to this day, walks down the hall and looks at me side-eyed like, I remember the story you wrote 5 years ago. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, come on, Rob, let it go, man. And that's Darius Leonard, man. He's like, you know what? They told me I couldn't do this. They told me I wouldn't be here. And it's like, man, here they are going to the playoffs. This guy is going to be an all-rookie on the all-rookie team this year, maybe defensive rookie of the year. And he's like, yeah. All those people who said I couldn't do this, I'm like, man, let it go. But at the same time, like, no, don't let it go.
Right.
That's why he's here, man. That's why he's here. Because he has that chip on his shoulder. It's a cliche, but he's got the biggest damn chip on his shoulder of anybody I've ever met, probably, other than Robert Mathis. And it's made him who he is.
To that point, I will never forget his reaction when, was it Chappie or somebody said, well, 40 tackles is impossible.
Yeah.
He gave a serious ass look.
I have that on my Instagram. Actually, I put the videos out on my Instagram. So if you haven't seen it, go to my Instagram.
You have
it's
to.
the same username as my Twitter. Go check it out. And people made a meme out of that. Okay, a couple people made a meme out of that and kind of used it. Like, I've gotten Twitter responses from that with just a screenshot. It's like, say what now?
Right.
I love that kid.
I love it.
He is truly, truly one of my favorites. I mean, I have so many guys. I know I'm not a fan, right? I mean, because let me tell you something. If they go 2-14 next year, they're not going to be happy to see me. Okay, so I'm not a fan. But I will tell you this: I have so many guys on this team who I just genuinely really love. I'm just telling you that they're guys you want to root for, And Darius is one. I mean, Jacoby, for example, Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett has no business ever being in my story, ever being quoted in my story. You know what I'm saying? But yet he keeps finding his way in there because the guy always has the right thing to say, and he has such amazing perspective, and he's just fun. You know what I mean? So, like, there's just a lot of guys like that, and I'm just telling you, they're just so fun to watch. And I have rarely had a team like this in my 20 years. Very, very rarely. Maybe never.
How does Game 3 change from the first two? We got an absolutely hot T.Y. Hilton in the first two games. Hopkins was not. The rush on Watson got you 12 sacks, 7 and 5 in the two ball games. How much of the game plan can stay the same? How much are you going to have to wear? And maybe T.Y. might be the biggest question mark in this whole thing on how healthy he can be. But if he's not the guy you go to, who steps up for him when you get that back down to Houston on Saturday?
Right. Well, look, I think it is interesting because the biggest reason for confidence against Houston is the fact that they haven't been able to defend T.Y. Hilton, right? I mean, he's been the difference in this series pretty much every year. So, does that change if he's not 100%? Do I feel less confident? I mean, we'll see. But I still think they can still be a pretty versatile team against Houston. I feel like they've had some rushing success. I think they can have a fair amount of balance and still do what they need to do, even if T.Y. Hilton isn't himself. So I think they're going to be okay. And then at the end of the day, defensively, that's where they can hang their hat. All right, they can make plays on defense, and then it takes some of that heat off of your offense, right? So I just think they're going to be okay. I mean, doesn't mean they win it, but I think they're right there. I think they should just continue what they've been doing against Houston. And even though they've had a lot of success throwing the ball, they've had a lot of balance, and they've consistently tried to run the ball as well. And I don't think they should veer away from that as well, even in this game, especially with T.Y. gimpy as he is. So I feel pretty good about the matchup.
Again, Stephen Holder joining us on the Payless Liquors hotline before we wrap. Yeah, the DeAndre Hopkins thing will be one, dude. That's the one that I'm really curious about, in terms of the chess match, where he went wild in the first meeting, shut down in the second meeting, and that the Texans are going to counter to find some way to get him loose, because he is an absolute weapon for them and one of the top 3 wide receivers in the entire NFL. So, is that the biggest factor in the game to you, or is there another one that stands out more so than that one?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're leaning more heavily on him, even more so now because Demaryius Thomas is done. So I think, yes, I think that's where it's at. I think that's what they're going to have to. The one thing I'd say, though, is the Colts, after that first game, when they came back to the second matchup, okay, they did what good coaches do, and they found a way to win that matchup. All right, they didn't let that guy beat them twice. And I think that's what it boils down to. I mean, you got to find a way, because remember, that was these teams play each other a lot every year, obviously, but between this coaching staff and that coaching staff, that was their first meeting in that first game. And in the second game, they made sure there was not going to be a sequel for DeAndre Hopkins. So I trust this coaching staff to find solutions. And if you think about it now, I mean, what was the Tennessee Titans' greatest weapon last night? It was Henry, and he was not going to beat them. He got his, but he was not going to beat them. That was not going to happen, all right? And it's because these guys made sure of it. They had a plan, and they got their guys ready to execute it. So I just think that's who they are, and I don't see any reason that would change going into a third game against Houston. You got to stay true to yourself, and you got to do what works and what is tried and true. So I think that's going to be the case again against Houston.
Really appreciate it as always. A happy New Year to you, Stephen. Thanks so much, brother.
All right, guys. Happy New Year. Good
stuff. Quick time out. I think we have another Boldy breakdown. A big
yes.
Q. Yes. Oh, you'll want to hear this when we.
I had to edit it and cut it down a little bit because
Did you?
He's very long-winded.
We will hear from Baldy when we come back. Don't go anywhere. This is the Grady and Big Joe Show. Just ahead of the pop quiz. Final pop quiz of 2018 here on 107.5 and 1070 The Fan.